Welcome back to the war. The year is 1944. The Pacific Ocean is teeming with the ominous power of the United States Navy, pushing closer and closer to Japan's doorstep. But in the midst of this vast, deadly ocean lies a small, seemingly insignificant speck of land, a place most of the world had never heard of before and would soon wish it had never known. This was Peleliu, a name that, to this day, sends shivers down the spines of those who know its history. But why? Why did this tiny island, no more than 6 square miles of coral and sand, become one of the bloodiest battlegrounds of World War II? And why, decades later, does its name still evoke images of unimaginable horror, endurance, and sacrifice? To understand that, we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, what price were the Allies willing to pay to achieve victory in the Pacific? What did it mean to fight in a war where the value of a human life could be reduced to a piece of territory the size of a postage stamp? Today, we're diving into one of the most brutal and in some ways controversial battles of the Second World War, the Battle of Peleliu, a battle that, for many, has been lost to history, overshadowed by the more famous names like Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and Normandy. Yet for those who were there, Peleliu was no less significant, no less deadly. In fact, it was a battle that some would later describe as hell on earth. So strap in. This is going to be a rough ride, but it's a story that needs to be told, a story that reveals the true cost of war, not in abstract numbers or grand strategies, but in the blood and sand of a small island in the Pacific. Now, before we jump into the thick of the fighting, let's set the stage. The Battle of Peleliu was part of a larger campaign known as Operation Stalemate II, aimed at securing the Palau Islands. The objective? To capture an airstrip on Peleliu that the Japanese could use to disrupt American operations in the Pacific, particularly the upcoming invasion of the Philippines. On paper, it looked straightforward. The island was small, and American intelligence estimated that the battle would be over within a few days. Maybe a week tops. The Japanese were heavily outnumbered and outgunned. Victory seemed all but assured. But as we'll see, things didn't go according to plan. The Japanese had been busy turning Peleliu into a fortress, and they had no intention of surrendering it easily. Instead of defending the beaches as they had done in previous battles, they decided to let the Americans land almost unopposed. They retreated into a network of caves, tunnels, and bunkers that crisscrossed the island's interior, turning Peleliu into a deadly labyrinth where every step forward was paid for in blood. But don't forget to check out our selection of playlists. We cover other wars like Vietnam, the World Wars, as well as Viking and Roman times. We will also be adding to our collection soon. Make sure you like, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Now relax and enjoy the video. That's an order. September 15, 1944. The invasion begins. At 8:32 hours, the first waves of U.S. Marines hit the beaches of Peleliu under a blistering sun, immediately facing a barrage of artillery, mortars, and machine gun fire from concealed positions. What they didn't know was that this was just the beginning of a brutal, grinding battle that would last for over 2 months, far longer than anyone had anticipated. As the Marines clawed their way inland, they discovered that the Japanese defenses were far more formidable than expected. The central ridgeline of the island, known as the Umurbrogel Mountain, but nicknamed Bloody Nose Ridge by the Marines, was a maze of caves and bunkers, all connected and defended by fanatical Japanese troops, willing to die rather than surrender. Day after day, the Marines assaulted the ridge, and day after day, they were repelled with staggering losses. The heat was unbearable, the terrain was unforgiving, and the Japanese soldiers were relentless. It was in this hellish landscape that men became heroes, and boys became men, often at the cost of their lives. Let's talk about that heat for a second. The temperature on Peleliu regularly soared above 115 degrees Fahrenheit, and with no natural sources of fresh water on the island, the Marines were constantly on the brink of dehydration. Their canteens were their lifelines, But even they couldn't hold enough water to keep them going for long. In the stifling, oppressive heat, the sun beat down mercilessly, turning the sand into a furnace and cooking the men in their gear. Exhaustion and heat stroke were as much enemies as the Japanese soldiers lurking in the shadows. But the Marines pressed on. They fought through the heat, through the rain of steel and lead, through the stench of death that hung over the island like a shroud. They fought because they had to, because there was no turning back. This was the Pacific War at its most brutal, its most unforgiving. As the days turned into weeks, the battle for Peleliu took a toll on both sides. American forces suffered over 9,000 casualties, including more than 1,600 killed in action. The Japanese, who had vowed to fight to the death, lost nearly their entire garrison of 11,000 men, with only a few dozen taken prisoner. But for what? The strategic value of Peleliu has been debated ever since. The airfield that had been the primary objective was never used to support the invasion of the Philippines, and many have questioned whether the cost in lives was worth it. But beyond the numbers and the strategy, there's something more to this story. Peleliu stands as a stark reminder of the horrors of war, of the sacrifices made by those who fought there, and of the immense challenges faced by soldiers on both sides. The courage, the determination, the sheer will to survive, all of it was tested on that tiny island in ways that most of us can't even begin to imagine. And then there were the personal stories. Men like Eugene Sledge, a Marine who would later write about his experiences in a memoir titled With the Old Breed. Sledge's account of Peleliu is raw, unflinching, and haunting. He describes the horror of combat, the bonds formed between brothers in arms, and the psychological scars that would stay with him for the rest of his life. His story is just one of many, but it offers us a glimpse into the human side of war. The fear, the pain, the loss, but also the courage, the loyalty, and the strength that soldiers found in each other. The Battle of Peleliu is often overlooked in the grand narrative of World War II, but it shouldn't be. It was a battle that encapsulated the brutal reality of the Pacific War, a war where victory was measured not just in miles gained or islands captured, but in the lives lost and the blood spilled on beaches far from home. As we remember Peleliu, let us also remember the men who fought there. Let us honor their sacrifice, their courage, and their commitment to a cause greater than themselves. And let us never forget the true cost of war, not in abstract terms, but in the very real, very human toll it takes on those who live through it. Don't forget to check out our video where we examine the differences between fighting in Europe to the fighting which took place in the Pacific. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Check back in again soon. Salute.